Thank you so much, team. I'm going to pass it over to our presenter. His name is Mark Hutchinson. He works with Wedbush Securities. Been working there for quite some time, and he has a super. If you can see his background, it is not fake. It's actually real. I've complimented on him several times. But Mark has a lot of great insight on how to improve your resume. What are some of the transferable skills that you already have as students that you can do to stand out to an employer? So I'm going to pass it over to you, Mark. Take it away.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. It's so nice to meet you today. And I'm really, really super happy to be here. Actually, I was telling Gus that I don't know who was on at that point, but I got an email today from Fulfillment Fund. They're celebrating their 45th anniversary, and they put out this really cool video on Facebook, and it's awesome. So if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go on there, check it out. But yeah, I am actually I'm going to introduce myself here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as I've put together a little bit of a PowerPoint for you. And, you know, I will say this right off the bat, you know, I've got experience in recruiting. As you'll see, actually, let's see here. There we go. I've been with Wedbush Securities since February of 2020. And in total, I think I've got 12 years now. It's weird to even think that, but 12 years of recruiting experience. So I've definitely been around the block a few times. I've read a few resumes in my life. So I definitely have my opinions. You know, if you ever go to any more events like this, or if you've been to an event like this before and gotten some tips from other professionals in the industry, there's a common thread, and then there's, you know, everybody has their own styles and nuances of what they're looking for and what they think can help you succeed. I can tell you, and when I first started making my own resume and interviewing, I didn't really know the first thing. There wasn't, I'm not going to say how old I am, but Google didn't exist then. For those that are old enough to remember, there was probably Alta Vista or Excite, and that sounds very archaic, I'm sure, to some of you. But even then, we didn't really think about it as searching for things. It's just like we would type things into the internet, and it would kind of tell us, but it didn't give us quite the amount of information. So I really relied on organizations like the Fulfillment Fund, where I was in Nashville, Tennessee at the time. And then, of course, my career counselors at my local universities kind of helped me. But even then, like, things have changed a little bit, but they haven't changed too much in the years that I've been making my own resume and talking to people about their resumes. I've done everything as far as recruiting. I've recruited for outside of Wedbush, cybersecurity professionals, IT professionals, executive and administrative professionals, accounting, even blue collar skilled trades. So you think of, you know, electricians, plumbers, welders, general laborers, warehouse professionals. I've done it all. And believe it or not, even for warehouse professionals where I worked, we wanted a resume, and we would work with people on creating resumes. So, and then in my own personal life, you know, I've interviewed with some pretty major tech companies and then some small mom and pop companies as well. And some of those experiences of my own applications, if you will, my applying and having other headhunters really help me have kind of influenced even this presentation, and hopefully it helps you in your next, you know, resume building that you're creating for yourself and for your next application for the next job you're looking for. So a few things I'm going to share. We're going to cover what a resume should look like, you know, the appearance of the resume, what are some must-haves, and even some optional sections. It's funny, somebody actually said this to me the other day. They said a resume is really like life. You just don't have a second chance to make a first impression. And it's so true. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a resume where, you know, even in my line of work, you would think, oh, it's not that big a deal if I misspell a word. Well, it might not be to a recruiter, but I've had hiring managers say, yeah, this person obviously doesn't have an attention to detail, which is crucial for this role. And if they misspell a word, that's showing, the attention to detail. And unfortunately, like the person, in my opinion, was great for the job, but they will never have another chance to convince that specific hiring manager that they really do have attention to detail. So you really don't have a second chance to make that first impression. So it's really important. As far as appearances are concerned on a resume, for some people, it depends on where you are in your career. If you are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, out of college or in college, never had, a job, or maybe only had one or two jobs, it is easy to create a one-page resume. For someone that's probably been around for a while and has done, 10, 15, 20 years of work or more, it is hard to keep it under one page. The rule of thumb is one page if you can do it. But if you've been around for about, 10, 15 plus years, in my book, it's okay to have a second page. But you want to be, as concise as possible, and really, get to the meat of your experiences, and we'll cover some of that here in a second. A huge thing for a lot of recruiters, for a lot of hiring managers, is the font. Believe it or not, you would laugh at that, but I actually had not where I'm at now, but when I worked in my agency recruiting life, had a client reject a resume because they used Comic Sans for a font. And I kind of knew it going in, but I just, I still presented a candidate. So I would say stick to just the most professional, and it doesn't matter what job you're putting a resume out there for. Use the most professional font that Word or whatever you're using offers. Times New Roman is an easy one. Arial or Calibri or another option, or other options. So I don't know, if you stick to the first three, I think you're pretty safe. Old English texts, much like Comic Sans, will probably not be taken seriously. So font size is also important. You don't want it to be too small. Obviously, you want to be able to the person on the other end to be able to read it. Also, you don't want it to be too big, because then it looks like you're trying to, and I can tell you how many times I've seen 14 or 16 size font, and it just like you're trying to take up space, or it just shows a little lack of understanding of what a true resume should look like. So 11 to 12 is a good solid size font to use in your resume. And we'll cover this here in a few minutes, but be strategic on what optional sections you want to include. Now here on the right side, you can see I've kind of included a pretty standard resume, and it's very clean. There's no images, there's no artwork, which depending on the role, sometimes like graphic designers or artists or whatever might want to include something, in the background. It's not required, but for the most part, if you're not applying for anything like that, like this person here was applying for a recruiter job, so they kept it very clean, and one page, easy to read font, normal text size. So that's pretty standard, and that's not just for a recruiter. That can be for any job, just so you know. And for the person on the other end, like myself or a hiring manager, they can see this. It's not, I'm trying to think of a good word, but it's not unbecoming, or it's not annoying. I don't want to use that word, but you know what I'm saying. It's just, it's easy, and it puts the person subconsciously at ease with the person that they are considering. And subconsciously, I like to go there. Subconsciously, it builds a little bit of trust between the hiring manager or the recruiter and the candidate. It's like, okay, this person knows what to do. They've already got a level of professionalism. They're bringing me a good resume, and then they can actually start to look at some of the points that are in the resume. A few must-haves, which I didn't cover in the last slide, but we'll see it on some future slides. Obviously, contact information, phone number, email address. You can even, and we'll cover this in a minute, LinkedIn is also a great one as well. But I definitely want to include an email address and the best phone number. Of course, work experiences and internships, anything that you've done, especially that coincide, that matches with the job that you're applying for, and even if you're like, I don't have experience, I want to be a trader in the stock market. I'm using that because I work for Wedbush, which is, a broker dealer. And before that, you did work in sales and you worked in some other roles. You can still, apply for that trader role, and we'll cover sort of what you can do to maybe give yourself a little bit of an edge that would, entice a hiring manager to give you a shot, or at least to have an interview. But you want to include, as much work experience and any internships that you've done in your career, education, and you want to include, whether you completed. So did you get a bachelor's? Did you get a master's? And of course, skills. And that would be anything from technical skills like Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Or if you've got some technical skills, like more technical skills like Java or SQL, just depending on, what kind of experience you have. Especially in the tech world, there's so many different softwares and things that you'll want to include. Additional and extracurriculars. Yes, people, recruiters like to see that. Hiring managers like to see that. I've had some interesting ones. You want to be a little bit cautious on how much information you include on the extracurriculars. But, I've had some really cool ones, like, someone said they like to, cook, or they like to surf, or they like, this one person was an aspiring chess master, whatever. They just, we see it all. And it really, it reminds, going back to the subconscious thing, it reminds the person subconsciously, whether it's me or the hiring manager, that you're not just a piece of paper with a name. Like, you're a human being and you have interest, and you never know, we might have common interest. And I've seen hiring managers say, what, that person has no experience whatsoever, but they played sports growing up that I played, and I'd like to just talk to them and see if maybe we can find a role for them here on my team, just because they played the same sport growing up. So you just never know. So I do highly encourage you to include things like that. Contact information. Okay, so we're going to cover some of these real quick. This one is very interesting. I have so many stories about this, but I won't share them because I know we have a time limit today. But believe it or not, you do want to include both your first and last name. You want to make sure that's right up front, not first name and last initial, or whatever, whatever your legal name is, what you go by, everything, include that. If your name is Jonathan, Jones, but you go by John, you can put Jonathan parentheses John Jones, or you can put that on the application. But you definitely want to include your first and last name, plus your phone number. I already mentioned that. You want to include whatever is the best phone number for a recruiter or a manager to call you at. Even though we live in a day and age where it's either texting or emails, you never know. You might actually get a phone call. And of course, emails. This is the one I was starting to laugh about when I was putting this together, because again, I have so many stories. You do want to keep it professional. I won't tell you the weird ones I've heard in my life or seen in my life. But, if you don't have a professional one, if you do have one that says, I love sugar candy at hotmail.com, then create, one that's your first and last name, or something that's a bit more professional. And a little side note to this, in this day and age, when you apply on, for a job on a website, make sure you also include your professional email address for your login, because on my end, I have seen several resumes that have the professional email address, but for whatever reason, when they were applying online, they used their non-professional email address. And I'm not saying I received one from I love sugar candy at hotmail.com and just came up with that real quick, but you just, be consistent, be professional, Not saying you can't have a funny email address like that, but just I highly advise not using it whenever you're applying for a job. And you can make 1,000 email addresses if you want, so it's not like there's a limit on that. So also in your resume, please include, at least a city and a state. You don't have to include your actual street address. There's nothing that requires that by law or anything like that. But at least if you include a city and state, it ensures that, right up front, if you live in Los Angeles, California, but you're applying for a job in Kansas City, Missouri, could that disqualify you? Potentially. And that's why you could write like a cover letter and include why you're moving to Kansas City and, when you anticipate being there. But, not including it, it almost feels like you're withholding some information. So go back to subconsciously, it's, the person on the other end, whether it's a recruiter or a manager, might be like, well, if they're withholding this from me, what else are they withholding? So just be forthright. All you have to do, include a city and the state at least. Link to LinkedIn profile, we put optional, but I will say this, I think I would highly encourage it. One, because chances are someone's going to look you up anyway. So just do the service and put it on there. And two, it just shows that you are actively a professional, and that you've taken the time to create a LinkedIn profile. And make sure if you do that, you're connecting with people and you're networking, because sometimes it is interesting to see someone's LinkedIn profile where they only have 5 or 10 connections. And, if they're new to the industry, I can totally understand that. But it's very easy to create a profile, to network with people. And maybe we should actually do like a LinkedIn mastermind class next time. I don't know. Throwing that out to you guys. You tell me. But yeah, in today's day and age, and I've told this to people, whether they're just coming out of college or they're C-level executives, I've had a lot of kind of coaching calls, not Wedbush related, just on the side, just being a good person, just talking to people in my networks, just saying you've got to be active on LinkedIn. That's probably where you're going to find your next job, and just kind of coaching them through what they can do. So anyway, these are just must-haves. You got to put this on your resume. Again, LinkedIn is an option, but more and more, I almost want to take out the optional and say you should put that on your resume. So something to think about. Of course, you want to put your work experience in. And if there's some of you on here that are like, hey, Mark, I'm literally in college. I've had one internship, or I haven't had anything, or I worked at, In-N-Out Burger or McDonald's or whatever. Put that on there, because to me, especially when I meet with college kids, and I'm using the word kids, but you're younger than me. So, but when I meet with college kids and I tell them, listen, anything that you have done, whether it's, you could, if you started your own hustle where you were doing lawn care, put that in there and say for, the last 4 years, I did Mark Hutchinson's lawn care, and put some bullet points in there. That shows an entrepreneurial side of you, that shows that you hustle, that you work hard, that, yeah, you were in school, but you were working, and you might be taking 6 hours a semester or a quarter, or you might be taking, 18 or more, and you're working. And that just shows a lot about who you are, and can really impress, a potential employer. So, but yeah, you want to start by doing it in reverse chronological order. So you want to list the most recent opportunity or most recent job you've had, and then go down from there. So 2020, let's just, if I were to create my resume right now, I'd say Wedbush Securities, February 2020 to present. And then below that, the previous employer from 2019 to 2020, and so on and so forth. But you want to start, first of all, with the job title, then the company name, and then the dates. I also, and I like the way this is set up here. This is, not everybody does it this way, but I like it where you've got sort of on one side, you've got the first 3 things, and then you have the city and state to the side. It just looks cleaner. If for some reason you can't figure out the format, not a big deal. I've seen some people actually put it right next to the firm that they worked for. I think that works really nice. But again, it's clean, it's separated, it's easy to read. Most importantly, 3 to 5, but you want to do some bullet points of your major responsibilities. Have a whole list here of action words like achieve, administered, managed, monitored, all those different. And you can easily Google, best action words to use when creating a resume, and that you'll get a bunch of different, suggestions on what websites to check out. A little, this isn't going to be anywhere in this, PowerPoint presentation, but something I learned when I was interviewing 10 years ago with a couple different tech firms, that at least with the tech firms at that time, and it's becoming more and more normal in today's day, not with Wedbush, believe it or not, but with a lot of firms, AI sees your resume before a recruiter ever does. And with that in mind, at times AI will reject your resume because your bullet points, the list of responsibilities and your experience, doesn't really align with job posting. So this is what I learned 10 years ago was, when I was about to apply with a couple, like I said, major tech firms, they took my resume and they're like, now here's the job description that you are applying to. Take what you can get from that job description and include that into the bullet points. Now, don't lie. Like if you haven't done these things, then don't put them in there. But make sure keywords in job descriptions, like for me, it would say full cycle recruiting would be an example of a job description. I need to make sure that I put that in one of my bullet points. Full cycle recruiting, interview candidates, negotiate offers, whatever's in the job description. If you've done that, you want to make sure that that is actually on your resume. Because sometimes we think, gosh, what do I really do at my job day to day? Look for your job description, if anything, on LinkedIn or at the company's websites as you're creating your resume, and then see how they correlate with the job that you're about to apply for. And like I said, just kind of marry the two, because AI, if on those, when I was applying for those jobs, if I hadn't put full cycle recruiting or negotiates offers or interviews candidates or whatever, sources candidates, all these different buzzwords that are in the job description, those tech companies' AIs would have rejected my resume. A recruiter would have never seen it, and wouldn't have gotten the interview. Well, I went through all the interviews, almost worked for the company, one of the companies, really big tech firm, but I was not ready to move to Texas at the time. I really love Los Angeles. So that is, it's not included here on the PowerPoint, but it's one of the things where I'd rather kind of talk about it and explain. It's hard to kind of put it into a PowerPoint concisely. So that's a huge thing. I want to hammer that in, because that is how you're going to get ahead, down the road, whether it's this year, next year. Most companies are going to be that way very soon. Thankfully at Wedbush, I see every single resume that applies to my jobs, and we can actually make a human decision whether or not you're a match or not. And there are times where a resume doesn't exactly match a job description for us, and I'd still take a chance and have those interviews, because sometimes you can find some transferable skills, if you will. So education, you want to include your university name. The program name is optional, but I would definitely, no matter what, at least put, Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. My degree, just so you all know, was theology, theological studies, and religious studies. How that translates to being a recruiter, you tell me. But, so for me, I included Bachelor of Arts because I didn't want, someone to potentially screen me out because they thought that I would bring a theological background to their business. Depending on the role, and with our firm, I think it is important, especially if you're applying for an internship. And I'll use investment banking as a example. That's a really lucrative internship with our firm. you probably do want to include your major, just so it shows that you're now if you're studying political science, that doesn't mean you're not a match for investment banking. It would just be like, oh, okay, so that's something we're going to talk about in the interview process to find out. So you're in political science, what's leading you to be interested in investment banking? But I think it's just it is important while you're still an undergrad, or if you're getting your master's, whatever, to include that information. And of course, your intended year of graduation, or if you've already graduated, include that. I've heard a rule of thumb that if you graduated more than 10 years ago, you probably don't need to include it, but that could evolve and change over the years. But for undergrad, or you're getting your master's, definitely include when you will be completing your degree. The minor is optional. If you're political science majoring in economics, that might be a good thing to include the minor. GPA is optional. In my opinion, if you're a 4.0 student, I would not put that on there. You're like me, who was not a 4.0 student, I did not include mine. Now, if you're 3.0 or 3.5, include that on there. Be proud of that. That's college is hard. Again, I couldn't have done it because I wasn't even there. But seriously, yeah, it's hard enough, and you should definitely you should flaunt your success as a college student. So if you're under 3.0, that's going to be a tough one, and I'm just being fully honest with you there. Some firms might disqualify for that. Me personally, as a recruiter, I wouldn't, because I was not 3.0 or higher, and I thought I was a pretty awesome guy, so I would hire myself. So if you have any honors distinctions, please list that as well. So skills. So we were talking about that earlier. You definitely want to include any of the skills. I was talking more about technical things. I didn't even think about right off the bat. Of course, languages. Please include your languages, what you're proficient in, what you're fluent in. Licenses, depending on the industry that you're getting into, financial world, there's 7 and 63 and 66 and 79. I mean, there's so many different FINRA licenses. I constantly am having to look them up just to make sure that they're a match for job posting. But of course, I already mentioned Microsoft Office, any coding languages like Python or C++ or R, and of course, software skills like WordPress or Adobe Creative Suite. So you just be thorough on that. Here's some optional things that you could include, certificates and awards, volunteering experience in charitable organizations. I really like seeing those personally. Tells me a little bit about who you are, and at least here at Wedbush, we're very philanthropic. We're very much involved in so many different organizations, both in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. And they've even given us hours to use to take a day off and go volunteer during the work week. So it's we'd like to see that, at least our organization does. So I would highly suggest you put that on there. It says a lot about who you are as an individual too. So campus organizations, yeah, I mean, why not include that? It shows that you're actively involved with your school. Subconsciously, going back to that buzzword, could give the recruiter or the hiring manager the thought that, this person is going to be a very active person. They can handle many things, on top of their school load or their workload. They're also, part of a professional fraternity or whatever. So doesn't hurt to include that. And it's, of course, any leadership involvement. That's, candidates like that tend to rise to the top, whether it's my firm or other companies. So hobbies and interests, we kind of talked about that earlier. This, example here shows baking, cooking, traveling, exercise, all those sorts of things. So yeah, include it. Again, it reminds, whoever's reviewing your resume that you're not just a piece of paper, that you're a human being and you have interest. And again, maybe you have the same interest as the person that's going to be hiring. So a summary or objective, which a lot of people like to include at the top of the resume. I think that's optional. There are some people that still think it's necessary. But you want to be very concise and to the point. Um, the reason for it is just to explain why you are the person for this job. You know, some people use this instead of writing a full cover letter, which cover letters seem to be, I don't know. I've seen more and more people on LinkedIn talk about how it's not that necessary anymore. But if you include a purpose, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 good sentences, that could cover the cover letter. You want to make sure whatever you're putting on there, whether it's summary or objective or all the bullet points or anything, you know, you're making sure that it's pertinent to the job. It's pertinent to you, you know, making you present yourself as the most qualified person for the job. You can use a formula in creating one. A little bit of background, what's your desired position for the first sentence, your top relevant skills for the second sentence, and any other work experiences that could align with this role. That's an easy way to put together 2 or 3 sentences. So if anybody wants to take a screenshot of that, by all means do that. A few helpful tips: check for grammar, spelling, punctuation errors. I think I mentioned that at the top. You just never know. Even the word "the," you know, it's "th" without the "e." You just, and there are times where you, and I will say this: do not rely on spell check from whatever, you know, word or anything like that, because sometimes you misspell a word, but it's actually a word. It's just not the word you want to use. So read it out loud. That is something I've learned in the last 3 or 4 years personally, is anytime I send an email or am I creating a document, read it out loud. Does it make sense? Do you feel like you're having to breathe a lot? And that kind of helps you realize, is that a run-on sentence? So read it out loud, read it slowly. That way you can make sure grammar, spelling, punctuation, how does it look? Omit the salary information. There's no need to do that. No. And in most states, you know, there are laws in place where an employer can't even ask you what you make at your current employer. I think in California, though, pretty soon, job postings are going to have the salary. So that's going to be a big change in the next year. So you won't be surprised to see that. This is something actually I talked to with, you know, one of my directors here, and I was like, you know, what do you think about email or resumes that say me, my, I, you know, and we both agreed, you know, you really want to, it's pretty much understood that it's you. So, you know, you don't really have to say I did this or I did that, you know, the word I should say. So, so you don't have to really do that. And customize your resume. I already talked about this. Review the job posting. Use same keywords that really kind of connect the two. It's huge. Like there's a couple examples here. These were actually some job postings we've had in the last month. Scrum, waterfall, data analysis, and there were some great candidates that, you know, they looked good, but they didn't have Scrum experience, and so we had to, you know, screen them out. So they might have had Scrum experience, but the thing is, you don't realize whenever there's a job posting, there's a good chance there is anywhere between 5 and 500 applicants, believe it or not, and more depending on the company. So, you know, if you really want to stand out, you want to make sure that everything, you know, all these words are on your resume. You know, whatever's on the job description, you're putting it on your resume.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. A lot of good information. Hopefully we can continue to work with you in the future. But once again, Mark, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I know our students